Welcome back, everyone, to another new style of video that I'm going to be trying to put out by me, Joshua Joshi Howard. This is going to be a review of the World Championships of Warhammer finals played between John Lennon and Folger Pyles. And of course, as you can see from the screen already, Folger Pyles won the World Championships of Warhammer with Talons of the Emperor Adeptus Custodes, something that a lot of people were not really expecting, and something that you should be expecting to see a lot more of, at least for a little while, before the next data slate hits. This is going to be a new kind of content that I'm going to be trying to put out maybe once or twice a month, depending on how many guard games actually get streamed every month, where I go over a review and go talk about some of the key moments that happened in that game. So, for now, depending on how well they're doing, I might just put them up for free, but there is also a possibility that depending on what kind of traction they get, because these do take a fair amount of time to, one, watch through the entire VOD, to make sure I understand them, and also to actually just talk through all this stuff. It might end up becoming new content that will be going on the Ko-fi or members only, so we'll take a look at how well I'll be tracking very specifically how well this video does over the next couple of weeks. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and launch into the game. So this is what the game looks like at the end of deployment going through, and you can see that John, he's got two chimeras, both with Catachan inside. He's got the tank commander, the Luminar's battle tank. One of them's here, one of them's here. It cuts off a little bit. I promise this is not my fault, but there's an exterminator here, one Hydra, a Hellhound, a second Hydra, and then Lord Solar's bodyguard unit kind of spread out in here. On the other side of the board, we have a unit of sisters that can scout. I think there's like another unit of sisters here. This is a unit of wardens, and there's another two units of wardens somewhere in here. I believe this is the custodian guard, and then the Caladia's grav tank. One of them is down here, and the other one is currently held in reserve. John is holding one Hydra in reserve, two units of Aquilons, and then a Tempestus Scions brick all in reserve so they can bring them out later on in the game. So this looks like pretty normal deployment. They are, of course, playing Linchpin Raise Banners on Search and Destroy, and John ends up going first. So overall, I think this looks like a very sensible deployment. A couple of opening scout moves makes a lot of sense. Of course, he has just the Chimeras kind of move forward. And then we start getting into some of the places where I start having a couple of questions about what ends up going through. So a couple of things already happens. It might not look like it from this camera angle, but this Chimera is in fact touching this objective, and this will come up really big in a moment. And I think this is an interesting play. Firstly, established locus, he doesn't actually have to be touching this objective. He can be ringed out a little bit farther here in order to actually be within 6 inches of the center. You do not have to be touching the middle objective. However, by putting himself on this objective, he is forcing Folger Pyles to come out and force the response from his opponent in order to actually get him off of this primary. When you're going first, you need to be forcing responses from your opponent because normally they're going to have an end game scoring advantage, and you need to build an advantage earlier on. The other Chimera, it's a little bit hard to see, but it did move up this way, such that this is, I think this is supposed to be like 18 or 19 inches between the edge of the Wardens towards the Chimera. And I do have a couple of other small issues with the way that this has moved. So you do see one of the Hydras moved from, I think it started here, and it ran to here. Makes a lot of sense. However, there are two key things that I think could have changed that would have made John Lennon's game a little bit better. So the first one is this Hellhound here is touched right up against the Chimera. And a Chimera is like, I want to say like 5-ish inches long. But the main thing to worry about is the Custodian Wardens with a Blade Champion have once per game advance in charge, and they move 6, and they reroll charges by default. So you should generally expect that they're going to move 9, and then if they can get to the edge of this objective, I mean, here should be about 9, simply because they are a little bit further back than the 9, because they don't want to be out in the open in case they go second. And then from one end of an objective to another is like 7.2 inches altogether. So you should generally be expecting your opponent is going to be looking for a 6 or 7-inch charge re-rolling. So they are very likely to make this kind of charge. It's at least like a 75% chance. And if they roll anything higher than like just barely making it, the problem then becomes is wardens can then move over this way and actually touch the Hellhound with a pylon or consolidate, and then it turns off the Hellhound's ability to shoot. So the major point here is the Hellhound, if it's like an inch or two backwards this way, butting up against the Hydra, maybe even a touch further back, it makes it way more difficult for your opponent to actually get into it. And because there are Catachan currently inside the Hellhound or the Chimera, when they spell out, you can use them to create a screen somewhere in here to make sure the Hellhound is never touched. The other major issue that I have with this early deployment, or this turn 1 movement, is these Leman Russ battle tanks are actually just being played too defensively. So one of them is Exterminator, so the first one's an Exterminator, and the second one is a battle tank. But realistically, I think that they should be something like this right off the bat. So we know that this is an impossible charge, even if you roll straight 6s on advancing and charging. But the major thing that you're looking for is if they are here, they have a lot more freedom of movement. You can threaten to push them this way to potentially shoot anything hiding in this pocket. Additionally, you aren't actually under that much threat. Remember, there is a Caladius Grav tank somewhere down here, just off the edge of the camera that we can't see, but it is there. And you're not actually that scared of a single Caladius Grav tank. So I want to show you guys a little bit of math. So this is what it looks like when you're actually playing up Caladius versus a Leman Russ. So the first bracket here is what it looks like for Caladius shooting at a Leman Russ, not in cover, no changes. And you can see that even under optimal conditions, the Caladius is only killing a Leman Russ about 40% of the time. However, if you're willing to spend 1 CP on Smokescreen, that goes from a 40% chance to kill to a 15% chance to kill, because not only are you now in cover and saving on 4-ups instead of 5-ups, but it goes from hitting on 2s to hitting on 3s, and you can see that that is nearly dropping the amount of damage that this is going to do by an entire attack. And if you're willing to further invest CP even more to reroll a failed save, suddenly, instead of like a 15.4%, you are all the way down to 10 or less % chance that a Caladius is going to be killing a Leman Russ. And if the Caladius were to reveal itself, it's going to get smoked back, right? You still have a whole set of you still have a pair of Leman Russes that are going to go ahead and shoot it right on back. And you can definitely use the tank commander. Going back, the tank commander could go this way, so when the Caladius pops out here, you're getting shot at by a minimum of 2 Leman Russes if you kill your target. So the Caladius can't really come out. It doesn't ever really want to challenge a Leman Russ one-on-one like that, unless you have nothing else to shoot at, and you only have 1 Leman Russ that can shoot you back. It is a very poor trade in general for the Caladius to trade for a single Leman Russ most of the time. So, with that, let's go ahead and take a look at what happens as John Lennon, he goes and touches the middle objective, does establish locus, draws no prisoners. He also drew something else that he just CP rerolled. But this is what this is what it looks like after Folger Pyles' turn 1 movement. You can see that the first unit of Wardens came out here, and it got a pretty normal advance. So this is looking like a 6 or 7-inch charge. Other brick of Wardens here came out, and now they're here. They are not going to pop their advance and charge because they have nothing that they can charge into. And then this unit of Wardens goes for an advance, rolls like a 5, and is now looking at, this is a 7, and ooh, what is this? This is a 6-inch charge, re-rolling. This is a 7-inch charge, re-rolling. So Folger Pyles has 2 very likely charges that he's about to make. And overall, this part is not the issue, right? You are generally expecting that your opponent is going to be pulling out their Wardens, pulling out their big melee bricks to go for these Chimeras. That is the play that John Lennon is trying to make his opponent do, especially by putting the first one on the objective. However, the problem then becomes, this is what the game looks like after he hits the charge. So the unit here in the middle hits exactly a 6, I think, because you can see that they are, like, nothing is based, so they didn't actually do that. And this charge went off, not a big surprise. But after the fight phase ends, we can see that the Chimera up here died. The guys got out and they kind of strung through and they got consolidated into that's expected. However, here you can see that there is like this unit of Catachan, something like this, and the distance between this Warden and this Hellhound is less than 1 inch. Such because the Hellhound was right up against the edge of the Chimera. This does a couple of things. Normally, if you're playing into Shield Host, it kind of is what it is. You can leave both of these units in combat with the Wardens, and you're never going to lose the Hellhound because one, maybe two Wardens are going to be swinging into it. Maybe with the Blade Champ, if they roll absolutely insanely hot, then the Hellhound can die. But this unit does not have the output to kill both units. That was my first thought when I saw this, but that is not true of Talons of the Emperor. Talons of the Emperor has access to 1 CP fallback shoot and charge, or shoot or one of the two. Regardless, they can fall back and charge this melee break again if it is left in combat. So the fact that this Hellhound is here, all it has done is turned off either the Hellhound's ability to shoot or everything else in his army's ability to shoot at the Wardens that are now in combat with the Hellhound. And this ends up being a bit of a disaster. It's also worth noting, so the two Chimeras did die, so Folger got 4 on Bring It Down and 4 on Storm Hostile. Because he got lucky, he rolled a good objective right at the beginning. So from this position, the game is absolutely not lost. The Hellhound not being able to turn off cover for one of these units of Wardens is unfortunate, but this next couple of moves is where John Lennon makes or breaks his ability to play the rest of the game. So this is what the... Actually, let's go back. So the major thing that we're looking at here, and John does a couple of really good things. So I'm going to talk about what I think probably should have been done, and then we can talk about what John actually does. So I do want to give John a lot of credit. He found a really good line. This unit of Catachan here ends up touching 4OC onto this point, and then perfectly ringing itself like a horseshoe here so the Wardens can never move past it. Okay? I think one of the major reason why you do this as one of the first parts of your movement phase is you need to see Folger Pyles will have 2 CP. Does he want to spend one of those command points to overwatch this unit of Catachan? And the reason why this is really important is because John Lennon ends up, in order to get that perfect horseshoe going, he needs to basically put 2-inch gaps between a lot of his guys. And because they're more than 10, if Folger Pyles overwatches and kills one guy, suddenly it's going to end up killing 5 of them, or 4, or like 3 or 4, because you're going to lose a bunch of guys all at once due to unit coherency at the end of John Lennon's turn. So John would either have to decide, does he want to keep the screen, or does he want to keep guys on the point, which is currently contesting the point from, like, there's, like, 1 sister here, and I think it's 1 or 2 OC. So John would have to decide which of these he actually values more. Okay, so that was a really good play. However, I'm not really a fan of what we see going out from here. So there are 3 major problems that John needs to deal with. The first one, obviously, this Warden break in the middle. The other one is up here, and the third one is down here. And there are 2 lines. I was talking with Scott Cairns a little bit about this, and there are 2 kind of lines that you can try and take in this game. Line number 1, okay, so the general thing you have to think about is this Warden unit always needs to be neutralized. It needs to be mostly, ideally entirely, but at least mostly killed. Then you really want to cripple or remove one of these 2 Wardens in the north or the south. After Folger Pyles does not overwatch the Catachan, you can kind of think of this unit of Wardens as kind of being dead because they are only going to be able to have access to the Catachan on their next turn. However, there is something really important to note. They can potentially shoot their way through the Catachan, and because there's 2-inch gaps, you can potentially charge through that screen as well. And this closest Warden here to the edge of about this is about 7 inches. And I was able to measure this by basically taking a 25mm base, which is most of an inch. It's 25 millimeters instead of 25.4 millimeters. And so you're going to get about 7 inches from there to the edge. Importantly, from here to this line here is about 13.5 inches. So if this unit of Catachan is there, there is a world in which these Wardens shoot the Catachan to death and then charge something. if it ends up being over here. Okay. So you can kind of treat that one as being dead for a turn, and you can decide to deal with it later if you want. However, this one, you need to be able to shoot at it with a lot of things. And there's two ways to deal with this. One, it's the perfect target for Scions. And Scions, they get full rerolls to hit against targets on objectives, and they get lethal and sustained into the unit of Wardens because they are infantry, which is the right kind of target for them to get lethals on. Even though your plasmas and your melters are going to be winning on 4s, because the Wardens have the -1 to wound if you are higher strength and toughness, it's still going to be doing a lot of damage. And I'll be showing you guys that in a little bit. So there's a couple ways to do it. The Scions can either come in like over here. This is about the 9-inch. You can put guys on top. You can also put guys like in here in order to shoot into the Wardens. And you should generally be expecting to kill about 2 of them when they pop their Feel No Pain. The other thing that you can do is you can drop the Wardens somewhere over here, or the Scions somewhere over here to try and deal with this. And this is where we start getting into some of the issues that we were already seeing. So firstly, this Hellhound can't contribute any damage, and in fact needs to fall back if you want to shoot at the Wardens in the middle of the board at all. So let's talk about what we would have liked to see. If this was not tagged and was like an inch back instead, then this Hellhound can be used to just move over in here and screen these guys out. You would also have a little bit more space for the Catachan instead of being... let's change colors to green. No, I know some of you are probably colorblind, so let's go to blue. So the Catachan, if they're here, they're not really able to move in the places that they want. But imagine that there was more room to put them here, and then this unit can also end up creating a screen, something like this. Okay? You can do a similar thing to the unit up north as you do to the unit down south, just by completely screening it out and giving it no ability to charge. So with all this in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at what John actually does with his movement. And here's where we end up. Over here, the unit of Catachan that was in combat ends up creating a screen, something like this. And the reason why the Warden unit down here has moved is because the Talons of the Emperor have a reactive move. You move within 9, and I think they move flat 6 afterwards. And so that has allowed Folger to move his Wardens to a place where they're a lot safer. And in fact, this tank can't see them. This tank can't see them at all. But we find ourselves in a very awkward spot. You can't see it on the board, but the Scions are down here off the bottom of the camera. So the only thing they're shooting at is here. This tank commander can see a couple of guys. This Hellhound, he ends up putting it on the point, I believe, mostly for OC. This Hydra has choice of targets. This Hydra only has one target it can shoot at, cross court. This Leman Russ has choice of targets, I believe, between that one and this one. And then this Leman Russ has choice of targets here, and this one can only shoot here. Hopefully that all makes sense. Other things that have happened is because he drew Overwhelming Force, and because he's trying to block out a Caladius tank from coming in, there's a unit of Aquilons over here that is going to kill the sisters that are on this point. He also drops a unit of Aquilons here, and frankly, I think this is not a great position for them to be in. The main reason why I don't like it is because it doesn't block anything. Like, the idea is there is Kyrie Adraxis and unit of Guard hanging out here, but they're going to kill this no matter what, and they're going to have an opportunity to charge into the Catachan at the same time. So you're not really blocking any charges. The other thing that I don't like about it is I feel like, imagine, again, if the Catachan that disembarked from the Center Chimera, instead of going something like this, were more like this, right? Because they had fallen out, or they had disembarked in a different way. They would now be able to screen out this unit of Wardens. The Hellhound could be here, and you could finish this with another unit of Aquilons, such that the tank commander can move over this way in order to have choice of targets here or into the guys way up here. But this unit of Wardens will never be able to charge the Hydra on this point. The only way they could get there is consolidating, and as long as you are doing your screening correctly, you can prevent your opponent from consolidating onto the point. Now I want to talk a little bit again. So remember how we said that the distance from here to here is about 7.5? There's a couple of issues. So the first issue is Folger can just shoot these catachan and kill them. However, that does present a couple of other problems for Folger. If Folger shoots at these catachan and doesn't full kill them, then John Lennon will be left with at least one guy on the point. That's an insane bravery. That's 5 points of primary right there. So he doesn't really want to shoot them. So the problem then becomes you could potentially declare a multi-charge because there is a gap here, and it's probably like an 8 re-rolling because you are still Wardens. But what they ended up determining was that if you took like this guy and you put him like here, it was going to be possible for him to consolidate afterwards when they full kill the Catachan and get into this Lehman Russ. They're not going to be able to swing into it, but they're still going to be able to stop it and the one behind it from effectively moving, and you're going to turn off an entire tank's worth of shooting effectively into the unit of Wardens almost immediately after. So that's problem one. The second problem is you do not have anywhere near enough firepower going into this unit of Wardens, and this unit of Wardens still has access to its advance and charge. You have to remember that it's this unit and this unit that have already used their advance and charge. They have a much lower threat range, but this one can go kind of wherever it wants. And where it wants is directly onto this point. It wants to turn off your primary, it wants to get the tank commander in melee, and it wants to kill them there. So John Lennon has set himself in a position where he is not going to be full killing one of this unit of Wardens. The Scions are going to be having reduced damage. They're going to be killing about 1 Warden instead of 2 on the immediate shooting, and then they're only going to be killing about 1 additional Warden when they overwatch. Whereas if they had been over here, kind of where Lord Solar's bodyguard had moved to, it was expected to kill 2 on the initial shooting, and then an additional 2 after that in an overwatch. So suddenly, the Scions end up being in a position where they can't really do anything. They end up having a lot of their effectiveness neutered going into this game. And if you watch the stream, you'll know that Folger did a pretty good job at rolling 4-ups. But the problem was mostly that like John Lennon had not set himself up to get lucky. He had set himself up in a position where things needed to go his way. And you never really want to be playing a game of 40k where you are required to make things go your way. If you need the dice rolls to go in your direction, it's because you're behind. Yeah, that's basically it. If you need the dice rolls to go a certain way, you are only generally playing that way if you're behind or you think there's not another out for your game plan. There's absolutely another out for this game plan. The other thing to kind of think about is like this Lehman Russ, because it was so far back, can't afford to go for like a tank shock here. And there are ways to kind of turn off this unit of Wardens. And so in general, because these tanks only have one target here, he's going to put them all there. You know you're going to pop the 4-up Feel No Pain. However, you could kill most of these. You can threaten to Scion Overwatch them. And then you also should have the firepower to kill this unit while the unit over here is screened. And so John Lennon took this approach where he's trying to kill like 1.5, maybe 1 and 2 halves. Like maybe you kill 2 or 3 guys here, maybe you kill 3 guys here. This unit should be dead. But it's a lot of half measures in a game where you don't really want to be playing into anything where you have to get lucky. And unfortunately, oh, yeah. So here's the math. So if you shoot the Scions at Wardens on a point, you're averaging killing 2. This is while they have their 4-up Feel No Pain, and they're on a point, so you're re-rolling. This is actually a little bit worse than what the actual math is, because I just put the Wardens as -1 to wound blanket instead of -1 to wound against things that have a higher strength. So you actually kill slightly better than what you see on screen. And then when you overwatch them, again, you kill about 2. Like, this unit of Wardens is mostly neutered just by dropping Scions in a spot where they can shoot them. But anyway, let's take a look at what actually happened in the shooting phase. So, after the shooting phase, this unit of Wardens over on the right, go back to red ink. So, it starts with 5 plus the Blade Champ. They lost 2. This unit here in the middle starts with 5 plus the Blade Champ. They lost 4, and then this guy's almost dead. This unit over here, I think, loses 1. And part of this is, again, dice rolls not going his way. John Lennon not having dice rolls going well. But the other major parts of this game are, one, the Scions, which you can now see over here, like they're rerolling ones against this target, and a lot of their impactful shooting is -1 to wound. It's not going to be doing what it wants to. Even the Demolisher Cannon over here shooting in here is going to be wounding on 3s at strength 14. So end up losing out on a lot of effective damage, and these two units combined should never really expect to be full killing this unit. In fact, I would I would be hesitant to expect it to even kill 2 between the 4-up Feel No Pain and off of the 4-up Infil. Like, you're just not getting that much damage through. And you could help this out a little bit if, like, the Hellhound here was able to shoot, like, its Flamer in, do a little bit of, like, do 1 or 2 damage, and then also turn off the cover saves for some of the shooting that is going to be coming out elsewhere. There's ways to get all these lasguns up to AP2, and ignoring cover, which will force everything to be on the 4-up Invul. At the same time, all these tanks over here shooting in here, you should still be expecting this to mostly kill the unit. The fact that he is still alive with a dude and the Blade Champ is a little bit surprising, so a little bit unlucky there. But I really don't like this plan over here. It's just simply not enough damage. And these tanks are now too close, such that the Wardens can charge them here almost immediately after. As we go towards the... Oh, in order to try and solve this, the Hydra ends up charging in and tank shocks and kills the last dude. And then ends up being in combat with the Blade Champion for a little while after that. Okay. So now John Lennon goes through, he goes with his plan, he executes his plan, and he doesn't get the dice rolls that he needs. There is now this unit of Wardens here, which is a massive problem. They're going to lose maybe, like, the injured guy is probably going to die to the Overwatch coming in from the Scions, but that's about it. And as Folger wraps up, we go back to the top down. We can take a look at what happens on the rest of it. This is his movement phase. He moves out Kyra, Draxus, and friends. They are now out on this point. Rhino and Witch Seekers or Sisters or whatever killed the unit of Aquilons that dropped in over here. And as we're going to see in a moment, Folger gets things that he needs to. And he actually makes a really good play. Let's see if I can show it. Yeah, so after their shooting phase, the Aquilons are mostly shattered. He's going to lose a bunch of them to... coherency, even if they don't just die from the melee. But Folger takes this unit and maybe some shooting from Kyra Draxus and cleans up almost all the Scions over here. And a really interesting thing is that John Lennon does not have enough CP because he spent one on Overwatch in order to... he didn't even kill the one guy. He does not have enough CP to pick up the Scions again. He does not have enough CP to pick up the Aquilons at all. And so, all the Aquilons, there's a unit here, there's a unit up that way, and these Scions, he's going to get none of it back, which is not the end of the world, necessarily, but when you don't have the damage already, it puts him in an even bigger hole. And what Folger Pyles will end up doing from here is this unit of Wardens, he really wants to full kill this. He does not want this to have an opportunity to come back. And there's a way to go after them, depending on your dice roll, where you can charge into these and still go into the tank commander immediately after. And he's able to do that. So he ends up going for this. It'll charge this unit of Catachan, and it will tag this Leman Russ. The Caladius will just contribute to killing all of these guys. The unit of Guard will go ahead and charge into the Catachan and be on the middle objective. And then these will end up charging the Scions here and going into the tank commander. And this is another angle. We'll flip angles. So this is what the charge phase looks like. You can kind of see over here, they are strung out, and the Blade Champ is going to kill this because he declared only one unit as a charge. And then he will use the pile-in from these guys to go after the tank commander. Of course, the Custodian Guard are going to rip these Aquilons to shreds. These guys are going to rip the Catachan to shreds and then touch the Leman Russ like we established was possible previously, and they had a long discussion with the judge on whether it was possible. And this is kind of the downfall. This is a very expected outcome of a lot of what happened from John Lennon. He unfortunately, I think, misallocated a lot of his units and shot them at the wrong targets. And then these two tanks are simply too close now. Uh, it's one thing if they are like just barely chargeable, like if the custodians just kill the Catachan and then have to go for an 8-inch charge. That's one thing, but this way they don't even have to go for the 8-inch charge. He's able to just touch. As you can see, this one guy here is going to be able to consolidate into the tanks, and so they are simply too close. And that ends up being that is the second mistake. It's not the first mistake that killed him. It really is the second mistake that made the game pretty much untenable. Because after this, we can kind of take a look. There is now no more Scions. There's no more Scions down here. The Aquilons over here got cleared out. The Aquilons here got cleared out. These Catachan are dead. These Catachan didn't get charged into, actually, so they're still alive for a little while. But this tank commander now has no targets. This exterminator now can only shoot into its own combat effectively. And this battle tank is not going to be able to shoot at these wardens. So there's not going to be any assets really left to do damage to these guys over here. And he is really seriously pushed back. And this is what it looks like. This is the end of John Lennon's movement phase. And you can see that this tank commander down here, I'm not sure if it couldn't or chose not to fall back, but either way, it gets caught. It's not going to be able to shoot on death because it's caught in melee. This Leman Russ here is stuck. It cannot get into the middle of the board because the other Leman Russ is in the way, and this Exterminator might just die in the melee phase, and I believe it ends up doing so. So John Lennon puts himself in a bit of an all-in position, and as we take a look at what actually happens, the tank that was here charged this way, found itself here, and died to the Custodes that were over here, leaving the Exterminator in a really tough position. The Custodian Guard, who are in the middle objective, did die, but the tank commander also died. And unfortunately, John Lennon gave over 2 Leman Russes during his own turn. And I don't know how much more I really need to say about this game. Folger Pyles is now going to hold like his home. He's going to put some pressure here. He's going to hold this one. These guys can fall back and charge into this unit. And also, there are 2 Caladius Grav tanks down here who are now like 1 Caladius Grav tank, not super likely to kill a Leman Russ as we identified earlier, but 2 of them is absolutely going to kill a Leman Russ. And then Folger also got lucky in that one of them did just kill a Leman Russ by itself. So the game really did just fall apart from here. I can click through. You can kind of see. So the 2 Caladius come out. Down here, the Custodian Wardens killed the Hydra over here. This Leman Russ died. All of Lord Solar's bodyguard died. There is a Hydra that rapid ingress here, which is going to stop some primary for a little while, which is kind of a cool play. But there is now no assets on the board that can deal with the 2 Caladius down here, the unit of Wardens over here, and Solar is going to die shortly afterwards. So overall, I think John Lennon had a tight game plan at the beginning, but to go back to the early part of the game, the major part, or the single thing that might have killed him, was actually this Hellhound being right here, because it got consolidated into. So that was one early fatal mistake. A minor mistake that probably wasn't fatal was these 2 Leman Russes probably could have been more aggressive as long as you're willing to pop smoke, because then they're going to have a little bit more freedom and choice of targets. But the other fatal mistake was these Scions coming down here simply do not have the damage. But, okay, so let's talk about the Hellhound again. So one is getting consolidated into. The other thing is that, as we already talked about, the Catachan had to get out like this, when what you wanted to do was you wanted to get them out more like this so that they can move here and move block. And they got blocked from doing that because the Hellhound was in the way. And then, of course, the Scions down here, instead of being here, means that this unit of Wardens ends up being a bit more of a problem, and you could have allocated units to screen this out such that it was not going to be a possible charge to this Hydra over here. But overall, so those have been a lot of the thoughts that I've had watching this World Championship Finals back. If you guys have other thoughts, make sure you let me know down in the comments below. If this is the kind of content you guys want to see more of, let me know that as well, and I can go ahead and make more of this. Depending on how well it does, like I said, it might become members exclusive. It might go over to my Ko-fi page instead. But I hope this was a lot of fun for you guys to watch. It was a lot of fun for me to make. I'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.